In April of 2020, I wrote my first book. By May, I was finished. It took 6 weeks. I was pulling 5,000-word days, I wasn't sleeping very well, and I was scrawling plot on the walls of a whiteboard. Honestly, it was a lot of fun, and I'd hyped myself up telling me that I was going to be a published novel by my mid-20s. In fact, I was so excited, I was shopping around to see which publisher I wanted to publish my book. I had a tab open on my computer for about 4 months that was Pegasus Publishing. They had an open submissions for fantasies, and I was just convinced that as soon as I finished my book, I was going to open up that tab and send it off to them. All I needed to do was get it edited. My first book was a complicated thing. It tried to walk a thin line of a story about people summoning demons, doing revenge, doing power politics, lying to one another, and sprinkling some witchcraft in along the way. And those people were supposed to be the good guys. In retrospect, I think the book had good bones, but I really didn't have the skills to tell the story at the time. The first sign something was wrong was when I started to edit. Every single chapter needed a complete rewrite. And I'm talking, I'd have a paragraph here, I'd copy above it, and then I'd rewrite every single sentence to the point where it was twice as long. And when I finished those rewrites, I'd read through it, and it wasn't any better. The real nail in the coffin, though, was when I shared the story with my mom. She is an incredibly supportive, optimistic person, to the point that I had told myself, whatever notes I'd got from her, I told myself, she's going to be too positive, I got to listen in, find the negative notes in between, and those are the ones that I got to listen to. But when she came to me, she had one note. She said, my story didn't have a lot of emotion in it. Now, if you're involved in a lot of creative projects, you know broad critiques like that are bad news. If you get 200 nitpicky notes saying this character I don't think would have done this thing at this time, you're actually doing great, because it means your readers are invested in your story, interested in it, and interested enough to notice discrepancies as they're reading. When someone says something like, your story doesn't have enough emotion, that tells you you've failed at the first hurdle. And in my case, I had failed at the first hurdle. I had failed to tell a story worth reading. This is apparently a common problem. Authors all the time say their first book was terrible. So common, they have a name for it. They call it the practice novel. And unfortunately for me, I'd written one doozy of a practice novel. When I was writing my first book, I was focused on the end goal. Finish the book, get published, go to conferences, win awards. I had a lot of goals. But the truth is, it takes a long time to master good storytelling. Churning out a book doesn't make you a better writer. It just highlights your current strengths and weaknesses. I hid from the world and just punched out a book. If I had been attending writers' conferences, if I had had an editor, if I'd been posting online, maybe I could have gotten some feedback. Maybe I could have realized that you shouldn't write a book with 7 POVs on your first go-around. That maybe I should emphasize what my characters are thinking, because that's the greatest strength of all books. And that maybe just describing the sequence of events isn't storytelling. When someone tells you that your book sounds a lot like Shakespeare's Hamlet, and the only story you've ever written was a hike through a Lovecraftian jungle like mine was, there's a chance you're biting off more than you can chew. I was taking on a story that should have been 100,000 words minimum, but I had only used 52,000, which is the length of your average middle grade book. My suggestion, and the lesson I learned, is keep your first book simple. Keep your first book small. It's advice I've heard from filmmakers, video game makers, and novelists. The epic that spans 4 books and 2 centuries can wait. First, learn to tell a story well. I had a lot of hubris in thinking I could invent a new genre in my first book. I'm happy to be ambitious, but the story I was writing wasn't like any other book I had written, which meant I was inventing it whole cloth. The truth is, most books really aren't completely original. There's something you can draw inspiration from. If I had looked a little harder, read a little deeper, analyzed a few more stories, I might have found a basis that I could build my story from. Some good structure that told me how this story should go. Now, this is not me saying you should copy people. Only that there are some valuable lessons you can pick up from other creatives working on similar projects. When I pitched my story to an editor, their first response was, "Oh, it's kind of like a Jurassic Park for demons." I wish I'd heard that feedback when I was writing the book, because it was weirdly apt. Some of the story beats in Jurassic Park fit perfectly into my novel and fixed a lot of problems. In a lot of ways, it clarified even the theme of the book. My theme was so gray at the time, but capturing demonic monsters was a whole lot like keeping dinosaurs in a zoo. It was something that even with the most well-meaning people could only end in disaster. What I mean to say here is that I could have studied Jurassic Park for good story beats. I could have watched Constantine for a lesson on how to tell stories with angels and demons. And I could have watched The Witch to really elevate the evil aspects of my book. I hope you won't make the same mistake. Don't try to invent a book whole cloth when you can learn from the past and from past authors. It's been 5 years since I wrote my first book. My second book did not take 6 weeks. In fact, it took a little more than a year. My third book took a little less than a year, and I hope that doesn't chase off any writers. This is more of a message. Your first book is gonna be trouble. But at the same time, thinking it's gonna be great and plowing through anyway is a rite of passage. The best thing you can do to write your first good book is to write your first bad book very quickly. As long as you're willing to be open and learn the lessons, you can improve from a failure fast. So write it anyway. Go for it. Take some big swings. Add 40 POV characters and make a monster the main character. What can go wrong? The best thing you can do is learn from the past and improve yourself every day. This is a new setup. I was a little tired of being in a green screen void, so I've covered my walls with foam pieces that really like to fall down. Let me know if you like it and if you like the new format. I'm trying to get off the AI art bandwagon as much as I can, so your feedback is really appreciated. Thanks for watching.